There are 3 pillars to every ACL recovery. Most programs cover the first, a few cover the second, and almost none cover the third. And this is why we have an epidemic of re-injury and failed rehabs after ACL surgery. I've helped more than 200 athletes come back from knee surgery, some of them coming back from their second, third, fourth, even 9th knee surgery, and all of them get back on the field stronger with more athleticism, and most importantly, 0 re-injuries. In this 3-part formula I'm going to share with you today is going to explain exactly how I've done it and help you figure out what's missing in your rehab so that way you can come back sooner, safer, stronger. So the first pillar is maximizing circulation. We want as much blood flow going into the joint, into the tissue as we possibly can. One of the challenges with connective tissue injuries is they have such small, such limited blood supply. This is one of the reasons that they're so slow to heal. So anything we can do, especially in the early stages, to facilitate your body's natural healing process is going to make things feel significantly better and also heal and adapt and recover that much more quickly. This is why icing is a bad idea and something we want to avoid as much as possible, because what is icing going to do? It's going to reduce blood flow. It's going to reduce sensation. This makes it helpful for pain if we are in extreme pain, but it's going to be bad for healing and recovery. For that, we need to maximize blood flow and sensation and circulation into the joint and into the tissues. This is where backwards walking and backwards sledding in particular can be highly effective tools, because they can drive large amounts of blood flow, even in the early stages, with very little stress on the joint itself. This is something I've used with a professional soccer player as early as 4 weeks post ACL surgery, still in his backwards knee brace, but we were able to get him on a supported backwards sledding exercise and challenge him very hard, push him at a very high level, even just 4 weeks out, and something that felt great. It did not stress his joint or his graft at all, felt really good, then didn't make him sore, allowed him to bounce back and come back and do the same thing again tomorrow. This is why it's such a fantastic tool in the early stages, because when we can't push the intensity all that much, we can't load things a ton, right? One of the things that we can do is dial up the frequency. So all of our remote athletes, we train them 5 to 6 days a week in the early stages, because it allows us to get so many more touch points, so many more wins compared to 1 to 2 sessions a week that you're going to get in PT. And so the sledding in particular is one of our best tools for being able to do that, again, because you can push it very hard, very often, but also very safely. Another tool that I'll also combine in these early stages quite a bit is the voodoo flossing. This is another one that is highly effective for driving blood flow into the joint. It's somewhat similar to BFR, or blood flow restriction, that you may be doing in your PT clinic, where they put the cuffs on to reduce blood flow. And this is essentially a way of increasing the intensity, making the exercise harder without adding load. Because again, in these earlier stages in particular, this is something we can't necessarily do just yet, but we still want to provide a high intensity stimulus, just one that is appropriate and safe enough for our body at its current stage. Now, the voodoo flossing combines a little bit of the benefits of the BFR. The compression will restrict blood flow, but we do that locally on the joint itself. So it can also really help with swelling, scar tissue, inflammation, because as you compress the joint and then move it through a range of motion, you increase the sliding, the friction amongst all of the little tissues in there in the joint. And so it can be exceptionally helpful for improving range of motion, as well as swelling, scar tissue, inflammation, things like that. What's interesting is this becomes a phase in and of itself in the beginning of your rehab. In the early stages, we just want to maximize blood flow as much as we can. As we progress, it stays, but it becomes the beginning of our session, because if I start a session with high amounts of blood flow, with sledding, with flossing, everything like that, then it makes everything that we're going to do afterwards feel that much better, because the tissue is exceptionally warm and it's much more receptive to some of the things that are going to be a little bit more challenging on the muscle tissue, and then sneak peek for later on, the actual connective tissue. So bucket number 2 is we really want to build and strengthen the local muscle tissue around the joint itself. This is the quads and the hamstrings in particular, and even more specifically, we're very interested in the VMO, the vastus medialis oblique, that teardrop shaped part of your quad right on the inside of your knee. This is the part of your quad that will typically atrophy the most, more than any other part of your leg, and it also plays the biggest role in the strength and stability of your knee. So it is one of the key areas that I very much want to build back and strengthen to a high degree in order to increase the strength and stability of your knee when we get back into sports and plyometric activities and things like that. Now, the key thing with this phase that so many people underutilize or ignore entirely is that before we can load and really challenge these muscle tissues in order to adapt and get them stronger and rebuild the actual tissue on your leg, is we need to rebuild the mind-muscle connection between those tissues. What nobody seems to explain to athletes is that the same way your muscle tissue will atrophy after a surgery, that neurological biological connection, that signal from your brain to your muscle, will deteriorate or weaken as well. This is why somebody who is 6 or 8 or 10 weeks post-surgery still has a significantly atrophied leg. They're significantly weaker on that side. When they go and do a bilateral exercise, a squat or something like that, for whatever reason, they can only feel the good leg fatiguing and doing all of the work, even though they know it's significantly stronger than their injured one. And that is because we have no signal going. That brain can't talk to the muscle to actually get it to fire and to turn on. And so without that, you can do 100 squats, you can do all of the weight, but none of that is going to go to the right place because there's no communication. So all that means is we are building in and reinforcing the compensation, the altered movement patterns that we already have after a surgery, and we are reinforcing bad habits and making things worse later on. I see this being a huge problem for athletes who start to plateau a little bit later on, 4, 5, 6, 7 months post-surgery, who feel like their progress is starting to slow down. So often it comes back to this issue that they should have done in the early stages. It's also very, very easy to hide this. Even though your numbers in the weight room may be going up, your squats feel better, all of these different things. Once again, your body is just getting good at avoiding this weak area and going towards areas that are a little bit stronger. So what we need to do is in these early to mid phases, we need to be highly, highly focused on one, recruitment, right? Mind-muscle connection. Every time we're doing a quad exercise, can you move slowly and deliberately in trying to consciously feel that muscle work and contract with everything that we're doing? And then our programming needs to reflect this focus as well. So instead of being in such a rush to load everything, we need to first focus on high repetitions, high time under tension before we get to high tension itself. This is where our first phase, if we do that properly, actually starts to help us with this goal as well. Because if we can go high frequency with things like our sledding, things like our isometrics become extremely effective here as well, then we can really start to facilitate the return, the strengthening of that signal, of that mind muscle connection. And this is where on things like our step ups, we want to start to go high repetitions before we go high load. When I'm first introducing the movement to somebody, I stay in that 10 to 15 rep range. I want to go exceptionally slowly on the way up and the way down, so your brain can really start to learn that movement pattern and again start to reconnect those wires. But then once we start to get the feel of that, instead of loading that, I want to go higher, 20, 30, sometimes even 50 repetitions for some of these exercises. And this will be phenomenal for getting a burn. That's your goal as the athlete. How you know this is starting to coming back? Can I just start to chase a muscle burn in that leg, in that quad, in that tissue? So this is the first area that most protocols start to fall off and not do enough. They tend to fail for one of two reasons. One, we don't get that activation piece enough in the beginning. So none of the strength, none of the loading that we're doing later on is as effective as it could be because we don't have that clear signal going from the mind to the muscle. The second is that they don't push this far enough. So yes, we train strength, we build back muscle tissue, all of these different things, but simply not enough. Most clearance protocols, if you go and do your biodex, right, where you sit down and kick your leg out and you compare it to the other side, if you get 90% of your good leg, you're good to go. We send you off less prepared than you were before you got hurt in the first place. You got injured at your previous 100%. Now your injured leg is at 90% of your other leg, which, let's be honest, we just spent the last 6 months barely training. It's probably less trained than it was before. And now we're going to send you back out and expect you to be successful. So we're doing the right things and trying to build strength and muscle tissue and everything like that, but we're just not doing enough of it. And so this is where having higher standards, all of our athletes, some of our clearance criteria, we have a Poliquin step up, 75% of your body weight for 10 reps on a 6-inch box, slant board squat, front squat, 100% of your body weight all the way down through a full range of motion. We're really, really loading the knees in that VMO in particular for 5 reps. Nordic curls for full control all the way down to the very, very bottom for 5 reps where we're really getting the hamstring. We just have higher strength standards that we need you to get to before we can look at you and be like, okay, yeah, we're in a good place. Now we can start to get back out there and go kick people, do backflips, do all the things that we want to do. But now the third bucket, the third window, this is, in my opinion, the most important one and the thing that really ties together everything that I do and why we've been so successful with so many of our athletes, but particularly some of our athletes who have had so many such high rates of re-injury before coming to see us. These are the athletes that are most at risk for re-injury over and over again. Our skier who had 9 knee surgeries before she came to work with us completely online for just 6 months and has now been skiing, doing CrossFit, doing all the things that she wants to do for 3.5 years, pain-free, strong, injury-free. This last pillar, in my opinion, is really what ties together all of these different things and also what but all of these other kind of PTs and protocols and everything like that, the main bucket that they are really, really missing. And this is training the actual joint itself, the tendons, the ligaments, the connective tissue, everything inside the knee, actually making that stronger as well. So not only are we stronger from the outside, the muscle tissue, everything that is going to shield and protect the joint, but we're actually stronger from the inside out as well. And so there are a few different ways that we can do this. Heavy strength training will do this. Plyometrics will do this. Even isometrics if we load them to a certain degree. But there is one training tool that we put more of an emphasis on that I think has more of a benefit than all of those put together, and that is training through a full range of motion, where we are fully squeezing the knee shut in the very, very bottom, getting full flexion all the way down there, and then pressing back out. This is something that seems to have a very, very positive effect on the joint itself. Again, all of those internal structures, the tendon, the ligaments, the connective tissue. One thing that it's very important to remember with all of these that we touched on in the very beginning is these things have a very, very small, limited blood supply, right? This is one of the reasons that they are slow to heal and adapt and recover and get stronger. One of the things that this full range of motion does is it circulates synovial fluid. This is the internal fluid that's inside of the joint that soothes and lubricates the joint surfaces within the knee, and is also one of the main mechanisms of delivery of nutrients to all of the ligaments and other internal structures within the joint itself. And so when we close the joint fully, when you squat on a slant board, for example, through that full range of motion, you are helping to improve the circulation of that synovial fluid and therefore the delivery of nutrients into these structures and into these tissues. This is something that for us is a very long, slow, patient game that we play, unlocking this ability for all of our athletes. That's one of the main things that people from the outside who look at what we do and try and copy us do wrong, is they try and just jump into these things too soon, too aggressively. These are very challenging movements on the joint itself. That's why they can have such a positive impact on challenging and strengthening the joints. So we need to make sure that we do that at a very slow progression and a level that is very, very safe for all of our athletes that we work with. And this is why this is something that is a 6-month process to go from, okay, this is the first time we've even started to touch some of these deep ranges of motion with lots of support, with lots of floss bands, where we're literally taking an athlete through a less than body weight exercise, all the way up to our athletes who are loading a bar on their back with their body weight and controlling that through a full range of motion squat on a slant board. Like, those are two very, very different points, and it takes a very long, slow progression to get there. But if you were just on the outside looking in, if you were an athlete, if you were a parent, and you saw two different athletes coming off of ACL surgery, one who squats to 90 degrees, doesn't look super comfortable, one who can go all the way rock bottom, ass to grass, and come back up, which athlete would look more prepared to you? Which athlete do you think would better be able to handle all of the forces and impacts of high-level sport? Clearly the second one, right? And so that's just our entire thesis of, okay, what are the things that we would want an athlete to do in order for them to look very prepared, look ready to handle all of the things that we want them to do on sport? And can we reverse engineer that? Can we just walk back to meet them where they are now and just take them through that tiny little step function all the way to get them to do things that they were never able to do in the first place? Like, that's really the secret. Like, if you want to come back better than you were before, if you want to come back and have the best chance possible of not getting re-injured, then let's come back better. You're going to have to take 9 months, 12 months off for this entire thing anyway. I know it sucks. I know it's not something that anybody wants to do, but it is what it is. So let's get something out of it. Let's not just come back. Let's not come back and be a shadow of who we were before. Let's come back legitimately a stronger, faster, fitter, more flexible, more robust athlete who is ready to come back and turn heads and have all of your teammates wondering where you've been and what you've been doing the last 9.5 months. So that's our formula in a nutshell. Maximize circulation. This is really just going to help with healing and recovery. Strengthen local muscle tissue. This is going to help shield and protect the joint. This is like your armor. The stronger all of the muscles are, the less load goes into the joint itself. But then let's also make sure we actually strengthen the joint itself, the internal stuff, the tendons, the ligaments, the connective tissue, so we can be stronger from the inside out as well as the outside in. That's the formula. Take it, steal it, run with it, do whatever you guys want to do. Or if you want actual help going through that entire process, if you want to be one of those 200 athletes that have come back better, stronger from surgery, send us a message. Let's chat and let's see if we can help you get back to doing all the things that you want to do. So I'm Zach. Thank you guys for watching. And until next time, bye.